Sports Snippets, Dennis Sullivan. It is Sunday, everyone, the 5th of April. Here to discuss with you a topic that I've been thinking of over the last few days, which is Major League Baseball of the 70s and 80s versus Major League Baseball of today. And what I've done is I've taken the 90s, nothing against 1990s baseball at all. It was a great decade. I've used that as like a transitional period. So for the purpose of this exercise, we're taking the 20-year period, 1970, 1989, and then we're taking 2000 to the present. If you do like the content of this video, please don't forget to like below. You can also find me on various podcast networks such as Spotify at Sports Snippets with Dennis Sullivan as well. So I've just started that barely a few weeks ago, and you can now find me on those applications. So let's get started, guys. Breaking it down into 5 categories. Let's get started. First, what I did, and before I start to break it down on the 5 categories, I just want to let you know that this would end up in a tie, 2-2-1, meaning 2 categories went to modern day baseball. The other 2 would go to the 70s and 80s, or old time, I guess you consider old time or baseball of the past. And we did have a tie as well. And of course, this is all my personal humble opinion here when I score and when I give the edge to a particular baseball era. So let us get right into it, guys. First category I have is the day-to-day players, meaning their skill level, their athletic ability, what they can do on the field. I have noticed, and in watching lately some games on YouTube from the 70s and 80s, the game today is a little bit faster, not a night and day type of thing. The players today are consistently a little bit stronger and faster. Again, not a night and day type of thing. And I'm going to give the edge in this category to the player of today. We are going to chalk up a point from the Snippets board. Category number 1, day-to-day players do get an edge, modern day players. Let's go right into point number 2. And for point number 2, I put home runs, ability to hit a home run. I mean, what's probably one of the most exciting things you can see in a Major League Baseball game? Home run. What do you want to see your favorite player do? Hit a home run. Although I do believe now it's just as difficult to be one of the top all-time home run hitters as it was in the 60s, 70s, 80s, although we're not really technically counting the 60s in this particular video for the purpose of just a comparison. I'm going to give the edge to today as well. And the reason why I'm going to do that is that there's more power and more, shall we say, home run hitting capable type players, meaning hit 15, 20 home runs for a season. There's more of that in volume today than there was in the 70s and 80s. It's not, and a better example to provide would be, it's not quite as uncommon to see a 7th, 8th place hitter hit 15, 20, sometimes even more than 20 home runs in a season. So with that being said, we're also going to give the edge to the players of today, guys. So with that being said, it's now 2-0 players of today. Category 3, the bullpens. Okay, let's talk about this. This is the one I'm going to give, actually I've scored this one a tie. Here's why. Today, the bullpen is used differently than it was back in those days. It's used in a way where it's not uncommon for us to see a game finish up 5-4. The winning team uses 4 or 5 pitchers. Okay? Not that they wouldn't do that in the 70s and 80s, but it was not the common way to do it. It was not that common at all as today. It's used differently. A lot of more matchup guys coming out of the bullpen, lefties on lefties, righties on righties, different matchups, and I have nothing against that. So in terms of like strategy, I'd probably give it the edge to today. However, the star power, the zesty personality guys coming out of the bullpen, and with that being said, the skill level was just every bit as good in the 70s and 80s as it was today. Guys like Rich Gossage, like Dennis Eckersley, although he was more towards the end of the 80s, right? He was phenomenal. Guys like Bruce Sutter, Kent Tekulve, then the list goes on and on. So I'm going to have to give a bit, I'm going to have to go with a draw or a tie in category number 3. Category number 4 I put here, guys, fundamentals. Fundamentals. Here is where the game of yesteryear wins this one. And I'm gonna almost say that the game of the 70s and 80s wins this one. I don't know about in a landslide, but they win this one. they win this category by fundamentals. We're talking about base running. Sure, you saw base running errors in the 70s and 80s. Not like you see it today, though. Now we see the bonehead base running plays and errors or mistakes have basically, they have increased, guys. They have increased. No question about it. When it comes to things like hitting the cutoff, right? Whatever happened to the art of hitting the cutoff, man? Ball gets hit in the gap, guys running, players on first or second base, balls hit to the outfield, he's looking to score. Yeah, you see the cutoff man utilized, not nearly like you used to in the 70s and 80s. What you see a little bit more now is an errant type of throw, or trying to make the big throw to, who knows, get in the highlight film, or be the star player of the game or whatever, and it's just offline. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't work. And you know what? We saw just as many great throws from the outfield back in those days with using the right fundamentals and the cutoff on more times than they would today. As many, if not more, in those days than you would today. Dave Parker was one, if we recall his tremendous throw that he made from right field in that All-Star game that we all saw. I mean, I know he made more, but that was on a national scale. I believe that was a 1979 All-Star game. I remember watching that. So that was tremendous. So, guys, fundamentals, we're giving the edge to the 70s and 80s over today. And I will stand by that. If you disagree, leave a comment below on any of this, by the way. And leads us to point number 5, uniforms. Okay, here we go. When it comes to uniforms, guys, the edge I'm giving is to the 70s and 80s. Here's why. Nothing against the uniforms today. Some of the uniforms are really nice. But I'm going to give the edge to 70s and 80s because, as we recall, in the late 70s, early 80s, this was the powder blue era. Teams like the Cardinals. Who could forget the Texas Ranger powder blue uniforms? I thought were awesome. With the Rangers across the jersey there in red. Those are great uniforms. The Minnesota Twins. The Toronto Blue Jays, although I think technically they're kind of those same sort of uniforms today. Tons of teams, guys. Montreal Expos. I mean, the list goes on and on. The Milwaukee Brewers. I'm just pulling names off the top of my mind. The powder blue look of the late 70s into the 80s was, in my humble opinion, phenomenal. So I'm going to have to give the edge in uniforms to the 70s and 80s, the game of yesteryear, over the game of today. So where does that put us? Puts us 2-2-1. So we gave the edge to the modern day players in categories 1 and 2, day-to-day players and home run ability. I put a tie for category 3, bullpen, and I would give the edge to the 70s and 80s over today in categories 4 and 5, which were fundamentals, and of course the category of uniforms. So what do you think? Where would you put all this? I'd like to hear from you. I would like to hear your thoughts. I did a little bit of watching, just to kind of add this here. I was watching a few days ago the 1973 World Series. This was on YouTube. YouTube's got a tremendous selection of old sporting events. I was watching 1973 World Series, Game 7 between the New York Mets and the Oakland Athletics. Game 7 won by the Oakland A's, and they would be the World Series champion. And then I went right into Game 1 of the Los Angeles Dodgers. The game was being played at Dodger Stadium against Oakland Athletics. I just watched about the first 2.5 innings or so of that game. I look to continue watching that World Series, along with I was watching a little bit of 1976 too. New York Yankees, Cincinnati Reds. Plenty of good matchups, a lot of good baseball from yesteryear. Hope you enjoy that, guys. If I kind of gave you maybe a little side activity to do these days with no live sports, then this particular video was more than a success. I had fun doing a little bit of the research. I also did a podcast on this as well, which you can find, again, on the various platforms like Spotify, Sports Snippets with Dennis Sullivan. So if you made it this far, really appreciate you watching my video. I will definitely see you next time, and very much appreciate you watching this and listening to the podcast, and I hope that you just hang in there, be awesome, leave me a comment, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.